blood flow. So now we're going to look at how blood is transferred throughout the body, specifically the heart, right? So as soon as you think about blood flow, we talked about it before, it's referring to how the heart transfers blood in and throughout the body, all right? So my big obsession with drawing shapes, here's my heart, right? And then here at the bottom, I can draw my lungs. This is my lungs. They'll come into play in a second. So for the sake of location, this is referred to as the right side, and this is referred to as the left side. Okay, I'm referring to the right side of the heart versus the left side of the heart. Okay, so the heart is broken down into 4 chambers. So if I draw a little cross in between these, the top chambers, these are referred to as the atria. The bottom chambers are referred to as the ventricles. All right, so they're named according to direction and chamber. So for example, on the right side, the top right chamber is referred to as the right atrium, etc. Okay. Now, the atrium are separated via a structure called the septum, specifically the interarterial septum. Ventricles, same thing. They're also separated by a structure called the septum. And we're going to look at the intraventricular septum. All right? And these separate the atria. Now, what separates the atria and the ventricles? These are these valves that we call cuspid valves. There's 2 types. There's tricuspid and bicuspid. So on the right side, we have the tricuspid valves. So these are called the tricuspid. Whereas on the left side, we have the bicuspid, or they're also called mitral valves. They're used interchangeably, means the same. Also, we have other valves as well that allow for the entrance of blood into the systemic and pulmonary circuit. So here on the right ventricle, you have the pulmonary semilunar valve. So these are called semilunar valves. This allows the blood to flow from the heart to the pulmonary circuits. Vice versa, the ventricle, the left ventricle, has this structure called the aortic semilunar valve that allows for blood to transfer into the systemic circuit. Okay, so this is just a basic idea of what the heart is composed of, and I want you to understand just how the blood flows. It makes it as simple as possible. Right? So the vessel that brings blood into the heart, this is referred to as the Vena Cava. You have a superior and inferior Vena Cava. Okay? And it brings deoxygenated blood that comes into the right atrium. Deoxygenated blood comes into this right atrium and puts pressure on this tricuspid valve, and that pressure allows it to open, and so the blood then spills over into the right ventricle. All right? So now, again, this is all a pressure gradient that's created that opens up these different valves. Now the pressure generated from the ventricle comes in and puts pressure on the semilunar valve. That causes the pressure to open, and there is a vessel here. This is referred to as the pulmonary artery, and the pulmonary artery connects the heart to from the heart to the lung, so to the pulmonary circuit. So it transfers deoxygenated blood into the lungs. Lungs' main function, it generates oxygen. It brings oxygen. So this is the perfect area for gas exchange to take place. So when the blood becomes oxygenized, now it leaves through this structure called the pulmonary vein, and the pulmonary vein, so this is the pulmonary artery, brings in oxygenated blood and transfers it into the left atrium. Right? So the same thing happens now again. The left atrium is filling, creating pressure on the bicuspid valve. Bicuspid valve generates this pressure and opens and allows for blood flow, oxygenated blood flow, to come into the ventricle, specifically the left ventricle. All right? And finally, at the end, when the blood pressure is generated so highly from the left ventricle, the pressure is generated on the aortic semilunar valve. It opens, and that opening allows for the transfer of blood to go out the aorta. This is not an exact replica of the heart, but I'm just trying to show you where each passageway goes, and this is the best way to really show it, because we're not using three-dimensional models, correct? All right, and so now the aorta takes all the oxygenated blood now to the systemic circuit, right? And so when we're looking at this blood flow, if I were to ask you, which side is bigger, the right or the left side, which one would you tell me? Because remember, the heart is also a muscle, correct? So which side would be bigger? So if you said the left side, you're correct, because the left side has to generate a lot more pressure because it's going all the way into the systemic circuit. Systemic circuit means throughout the whole body. Whereas here, the right ventricle has to generate enough pressure only for one system, and that's the pulmonary circuit. So always remember, the left side of the heart is always bigger.